morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this internal training session about how to generate a user interface / user experience requirements. So let's jump immediately on the menu for today, the agenda and the main learning objectives. So why we are today, this morning, it's because we really want to have a expert perspective about how to better design the personas for our ENVRI-Hub services, and also once we design such personas, how to perform research on their needs, on the personas, but then mostly on real user groups that we are going to identify soon, that every service owner is responsible for identification. Then will be also responsible to pick the preferred form of interactions with the user groups. So we have with us Kathy Berns, that she very kindly accepted to conduct this training session as our guest trainer. And therefore, the first part of the training session will be covered by Kathy and their presentation. Then we will have officially a Q&A in the middle, but please do feel free to input your comments and questions in the chat that will be monitored throughout the event. And then in the second part of the session, we are going to perform a hands-on exercise together, specifically with the service owners that are in the building right now. So we have our learning objectives. So as I said, defining realistic persona, listing expected outcomes from the interaction with the user groups on the ENVRI-Hub services, and then hopefully being able to choose the most effective formats to reach out and to generate needs of our user groups. Before passing the floor to Kathy Berns, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Aalto University. She is a service designer for climate change policy. And I would like to ask everybody to fill in a very quick live poll, just 5 questions for you that will help me understand where you're already positioning yourselves with respect to concepts of designing of user personas, and elicitations of needs. So let me pull up the polls right now. I'm trying these features of polls that are embedded in Zoom. You are testing this with me. So I'm launching the poll. Please let me know if you are seeing the poll. Otherwise, well, I'm also putting the QR code to the polls in the chat. So if you prefer to participate via your phone, you can. Can somebody give confirmation whether you see the polls or not on your screen?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Okay, there's a very long link, but if you click on the chat right now, you also have the link to the QR code if you prefer. Fill it in on your phone. Thank you for participating. Okay, I see some people already are replying. Yes. After the training session, I'm going to ask the audience more or less the same question. These help us really to understand whether the training session was helpful for you, what you perhaps wanted to cover it in a different way, or whether you need, for example, a second training session on the same topics, on similar topics, and so on. So thank you all for participating with your answers. I'm leaving it, okay. Another minute. I see Mariana. Hi, Mariana, thank you for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
Hi. Good morning.
I am in Buenos Aires, so it's super early in the morning. So this is why
Thank
I didn't
you.
put the camera.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. We didn't expect you, but yeah, thank you for making it eventually. Thank you very much. So just another couple of questions of answers, perhaps. I see that almost everybody participated. And then I want to okay, I guess that me, the trainers, and another couple of colleagues are not filling in. So I guess, is it okay if I end the poll? I think everybody. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you so we can get a look together. So I guess now you can see the results with me, right? Yes. So yes, I see. Yes, I see that majority of you have already heard about user personas, and some of you, yeah, almost half of you have already applied these concepts in your work of research, but appreciate expert advice, and that's why we are here this morning. Mixed bag for how you feel about describing already specific use cases for your ENVRI-Hub services. And then again, same for how familiar are you with the concept, with the researching user interfaces needs. Half of you already have applied this in your research and your work. And I see an encouraging, I don't know, 44% I can list. Not so encouraging. We need to work on, better list the specific needs that we want to collect. So again, okay, I think that we are in the right place this morning. So Kathy, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I'll share my screen. So hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for the nice introduction, Eleonora. So today I'm just going to give an introduction to user requirements capture. And since I've had a conversation with Eleonora and Angeliki before, I'm going to try my best to kind of tailor it a bit to the current challenges you are facing in your team. So yeah, we're going to start about, thinking about why do we do user requirements or user experience research? And of course, the whole idea here is to meet the actual needs of the users. We know when we're designing tools and systems ourselves, we're going to rely a lot on our own assumptions, and those come along with our specific expertise through our work processes, but also kind of our understanding and knowledge of using systems in our own daily lives. And so a lot of assumptions and experiences and needs are kind of built up through that. And it can be very hard to shake them and really understand, okay, the people we're designing for in this particular concept. So it's very important to capture these user requirements in the early design processes and the early design stages, and it could help with more effective and usable and satisfying projects. And, you know, not only about making them easy to use, but it's also very important that services and systems are something that users overall want to adopt and actually use for a long time. So that's really key aspect of actually designing something that's useful and practical for them and there to achieve whatever goal they're trying to achieve through the system. And as we'll speak about today, you know, this is something that's really important, of course, in the beginning of a project, but it's also something that takes place on an iterative basis throughout the whole life cycle of developing and deploying a product, as well as, you know, throughout the cycle of use for maintaining it. And what we're really going to try to look at today is how to do this more requirements capture in the middle of the process, as you are in your current challenges at the moment. So yeah, just a kind of an overview of user experience research and design. We have kind of follow this kind of iterative design cycle. There's many different design models you might see or approaches to design. You've probably seen these similar kind of diagrams in the past. About, you know, empathizing with users, defining the problem, ideating, prototyping, and testing. And different design teams use these in different ways. So sometimes you might see like this more lean approach that is just like understand, build, test, repeat. And it can take place in a lot of different stages. And often what it comes down to, like how you want to approach this kind of design process or this design cycle is about what you're actually trying to get out of the system, or what you're trying to get out of the process. There's no one size fits all, as is the case with most things. So sometimes if you're starting on a project, it could be really unknown. Okay, we don't really know who the users are yet. We don't know really what the system could do. We're starting from a very open space. And then it could be really important to invest a lot of time in this kind of empathize stage, doing a lot of background generative research in the beginning to understand, okay, who are the users here? What are the actual opportunities? What are the possibilities of what we can design for? And some of the later stages might be a bit shorter. While in other situations, you could have, we already really know what the problem is and who the users are going to be. So we want to maybe just refine that a little bit, get deeper insights, but the big challenge is on how to actually solve the problem itself. So how we kind of jump into a design cycle like this can really vary depending on what you're trying to design. So you'll typically go through each stage, but what kind of emphasis and where you'll spend your most time can really change a lot depending on the project itself. But overall, you know, the processes of both understanding users through user experience research and then actually applying those insights into designs and understanding and evaluating these designs and how it's going to work in the wild is really about kind of really understanding user behaviors and needs and their motivations for using a product and how they're going to use it throughout their work cycle or their personal life in an intuitive fashion. So yeah, as Eleanor mentioned in the introduction, you can really think of there's two flavors of user experience research and design. And these are what I like to call designing the right thing, which captures generative research, and then designing the thing right, which captures more of an evaluative research. And it can be quite tricky to, sometimes it seems maybe quite obvious, but it can be quite tricky to really stay clear on distinguishing these two kind of flavors of design of user experience research and methods and what are we talking about? Requirements capture. And this is particularly challenging when you're kind of in the middle of a process, such as you guys are now. So when we're thinking about designing the right thing at a generative research stage of user experience research and design, we're kind of asking questions such as, who are we designing for? What are their existing practices? What kind of challenges and needs do they face? And where and when will the interaction take place? So questions such as this. We're really trying to understand what is the field here. As I mentioned earlier, who are the users? What are their challenges? And this could vary a little bit as well. So sometimes you really know who the users are, and you want to dig deep into the challenges, and vice versa. But we're really understanding on what is the product we're trying to develop here. What's it going to do? Who's it for? We're not really thinking about the details of how it's going to work. And so the kind of methods you would use in this process of designing the right thing is looking at, observing. Observing is also always a really nice first step to a project, where you can, if you have access to the field, where you can sit down, look, observe users in their natural habitat, so to speak, how they're working, really see their workflows. It's also really useful to use surveys. I know you guys have done this already, to kind of understand the kind of broader market, get kind of overall over demographic information and really understanding your user group in that way. And then, of course, using interviews for more in-depth qualitative understandings. And once again, focus groups that gives kind of a more interactive and hands-on approach. And something I work with a lot that maybe is not something, maybe it's a bit more of a specialized method, is co-design workshops. So actually sitting down with stakeholders and trying to co-design the product together. And, I have an example here that we have done at part of the ICOS project I'm involved with. And this is very early stage. We're not really necessarily designing a system, but we're working together with stakeholders to design what we're going to design, if you will. Like really using this co-design workshop as a way to brainstorm collaboratively and understand who the users are, and what their needs and challenges are. So this is something that can be done, thinking of design in the very early stages of like what we're doing now, of trying to brainstorm and understand what is the actual space here we're designing for. So this can definitely be done collaboratively. And you can see myself now in the lovely picture of myself in the bottom right corner. There's also some more kind of advanced or experimental process of doing this, such as design games. And as you can imagine, this can be a process, maybe you're familiar with it. You see a lot now of kind of design card games. So different activities that actually are designed to elicit insights from consumer or from stakeholders and potential users, really trying to get into their minds and open up their minds to thinking about things differently. And games can be really useful for that. And also for specific cases, there's also methods of design probes. And this is really interesting, where you would give users a packet of different materials that they would take home and interact with in their own time throughout their daily lives. And depending on the kind of the context of what you're trying to understand. So if you're really trying to design for like more intimate areas, such as people's home life, this can be a really interesting way to get like a clear, like a direct insight into that without kind of the imposition of like sitting in someone's home and observing them. So really depending on what you're trying to design, there's like a whole world of really interesting and valuable methods out there. And kind of one of the beginning challenges, of course, as I'm sure you're aware of, is really choosing the right method for the situation you're in. So then we can look at the kind of next step of designing the thing right. And this is kind of more of an evaluative research. And I think for people who are not really involved in kind of design processes, a lot of, maybe if you ask somebody on the street, what is user research, user experience research or user experience design, they'll think a lot about this evaluative research. And this is really looking at the usability of a product or a service. So you're really thinking about, how effective is the service or system? Do users find it intuitive? What works, what doesn't work? How does it work, in the wild? So not just looking at it in a lab setting, but say, for example, if you're designing a mobile application that people use when biking, you want to see how it works while they're actually biking, not just while they're sitting in a lab. And then looking at where improvements could be made. So this is really what we think of as, usability testing as a broad term. So this is kind of what you have done when you have your the concept and the product developed to a certain extent. And this can be, a kind of high fidelity prototype or the actual system itself that you're trying to refine. And of course, this kind of user testing and evaluative research happens ongoing in a project. You're always trying to, improve it, tweak it, work with feedback from users. But as you can see, it's really a very different part of the process of user experience research and design. It's you can really see how, even though it's, you know, weaved into the iterative process, it is quite, the goals of what you're trying to achieve are really quite different. So as you can see here, some of the methods you could use is like usability testing, heuristic evaluations. I know I spoke last time with Jaliki about the usability heuristics. I can share those after. These are kind of the baseline what a system should look like. So you know, having visibility of system status, for example, so people know what's happening in the system. If I click a button, do I know that something's actually loading? Is what I've done have an effect? So there is a like really clear defined set of usability heuristics that systems should follow to be intuitive and effective. So this is a really good example of something you could do in an early stage of testing your system to see, okay, is it meeting these basic heuristics first? And then, you know, gather as much information and knowledge as you can before then you would go to conduct user testing with users. And then again, like I was talking about, the difference between using like lab testing and field testing. So, you know, there's one thing about investigating how the system works in a lab setting, which can be really beneficial from the beginning stages, but then eventually you will also want to see how it works, you know, in the field, in the context in which it will be used. And then to really get a bit more granular, we have the kind of process of A/B testing, where you would have two versions of the system with slight differences, and you're testing them against each other to see which is the most effective. So of course you can, with both designing the right thing and designing the thing right, you can go very in depth. There's of course a whole world of methods and approaches you can use, but here's an overview of kind of what we would do and really try to capture the distinction between the two frames of mind in a design process. So as I kind of, excuse me, alluded to, the type of research you conduct really has a direct influence on the trajectory of your design. So just to sum up, you know, the generative research identifies the users, their needs, and informs the development of the features, where the evaluative research confirms the usability and satisfaction and ensures that the needs are met effectively in an intuitive and efficient way. So as you can imagine, if you're trying to conduct evaluative research and you do it through a generative research lens, you're not going to get very far, and vice versa. You're going to be able to go through the process, but it's not going to give you the insights you really need, and it could really be detrimental to the progression of your project. So I understand like one of your key challenges at the moment is exploring how you can expand existing services to new user groups. So you have kind of already built quite a functional service, and it's working well for a certain subset of users, but you're like, hey, let's see if we can expand this to new groups. We don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, but of course we do want to understand how we can add specific value for these new user groups. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about how I would approach this particular challenge, and hopefully it can be helpful for inspiring you on how to proceed in your work. So as I probably made quite clear, at this stage, generative research is still required. So it could be really tempting, or you know, it could seem quite logical. Okay, we have this great system, it's already built, it's ready to be interacted with. Wouldn't it be useful if we can just take this system to the new user groups, ask them what they think about it? Would they use it? Would they not use it? This could be quite a straightforward way to go about it, as you know, we already have the system there, so why not share it? And I can really see how, you know, you can see the benefit of this. And it does, I mean, it sounds great, but in reality, with the like psychology of new users and trying to understand when they're presented with like a fully functional system like that, it really kind of it can often block their imagination and their want or their desire to actually share what they would actually use. You can imagine if somebody presented a fully functioning system to you, you're not going to want to tell them it's awful or it's not fitting your needs, because it already looks so complete. It doesn't look like there's room for so many adjustments. So when we want to do generative research at this stage, again, you know, it's very similar to how we would approach a project in the beginning, because we're still trying to understand new users. We want to understand, like I said in the beginning, you start a process by thinking, okay, who are the users? Who are we designing for? So that's something you're trying to do here as well at this stage, right? Understand these new user groups. And these new user groups will have diverse needs and preferences, and they also could have different cultural or contextual differences as well, especially when we're talking about these, EU projects we're working on. And then another big challenge is actually balancing the existing and the new users. So if you already have current stakeholders or users using a system, they've already gotten accustomed to a system, you've kind of been designed for their preference. So then if we're adding new users in, we want to add new features, and maybe we're thinking to take features away if they're like duplicate. So it's also really important to maintain your core user experience for those who are already using it. Don't forget about what their needs are, and really understand how adding complexity to this system, or adding complexity in the design of the system more specifically, in terms of balancing kind of the new and the old. This is also something you really need to think of, and it does require this more of a generative research approach. So I'll just go through a few of the methods that you would use in this situation. I'm familiar that you have used some of them already, and we're going to work with some of your survey data today. But as you know, surveys is something we use to kind of take a broader look at the user needs and motivations. And it's really useful because we can do it at a scale and inspire the product information. So yeah, I would use this when you're, exploring new markets and user segments, which is exactly what you're trying to do here. But you can also use it to identify the unmet and pain points of your current users. So if you really want to kind of approach this complexity in design, when you're distributing the survey, you can try to consider your existing users as well, but mostly having a focus on the new. And then we'd also might use interviews. And I know this is something you guys are planning to do kind of in some of the next stages of your process, to really gain like deep and more rich qualitative insights into your user groups. So here, I don't know how familiar people are with conducting interviews in this setting, but for effective user research interviews, I'd really recommend a semi-structured process that's really centered around, of course, you want like a structured set of questions, what you're trying to understand, where you're kind of going, but also have more of an open approach and kind of focus in your active listening. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, when we're like designing systems, of course, we have a sense of what we would want it to do, how we would expect a service such as this to work. And of course, you're also coming into this with the knowledge from your previous user group. So it's kind of a mix of your own assumptions, what you know from the previous user group. And that's fine. I mean, we're always going to start an interview process from somewhere. But it's really important to have this more open approach to allow the perspectives and the ideas of the new user groups to really come in. So really focusing on open-ended questions that encourages deeper conversations and allowing for this flexibility to kind of merge your knowledge and the insights of the participants in the interview study. So this could be a matter of, asking somebody, describe your work process when you're trying to achieve X, and then they focus then on what they're actually doing, their current practices, and not necessarily in relation to your service, but you can really get insights into what they do already and start to understand how your service might fit into that, for example. So that could be opening questions. You're really starting kind of more on a general level, really focusing on what they're doing at the moment. And then later you might start to, focus a bit more on the features of your service and how that can integrate in. But really overall, just having this kind of knowing who you're speaking to. And this is what we will work a bit with in the user persona exercise. But like really understanding going in, okay, who am I speaking to here? What point are they coming from? What do I want to know? What do I need to know from them to design for this user group? But then also keeping it quite open, understanding, okay, what are they doing? What are their needs? Without kind of putting them into a box of what your service is currently doing. So of course, there is limits to what we can design and what we have the capacity to design in different projects and companies, etc. But we still want to open it up as much as possible in the beginning so we can explore all possibilities and try to get as close as possible. If we're going in with too many constraints, I mean, it boxes our thinking and it also boxes in thinking of your potential user. So I think it probably is pretty obvious that we can use interviews. There's such a flexible method. It can be used throughout all stages of the design process. So we're looking kind of, in this case, about the first three uses here. So in the early stage research is what we're talking about now, like really exploring the unmet needs, the pain points and context for new product ideas. So this can be in the beginning, or instead like really understanding the needs and behaviors of your new user groups. We also can use them as post-survey follow-up. When you've done a really, valuable survey, you can get a lot of interesting insights, and you might want to conduct an interview study to really delve deeper into the trends and anomalies you've identified in these quantitative surveys. So surveys are really useful in this process as well. And then also for persona development. So you can, conduct, personas are developed off your kind of this more qualitative research, but you can also, expand it. So, really focus on the questions that you want to understand from a persona point of view, and then use this to really create the user archetypes based on the in-depth narratives. And then also, if you really want to, if developing these personas is really important to the project. So as I mentioned, there's no one size fits all. Some projects like really having a really in-depth understanding of the different user groups, if they're quite different, it could be really important to actually really useful to invest more time into iteratively developing these personas. So you could go through an iterative stage of the persona development in terms of, developing initial persona and then conducting further interviews to really further develop and get insights into this persona. And then, of course, in more of the design the right thing, interviews are also used for usability feedback. So, for example, if you're conducting a lab test or a usability test, that's more, of a structured process of engaging with the system. It's also quite common to use interviews as a follow-up interview to these design processes, evaluative processes, to understand more in depth what the user was experiencing throughout the process and how it made them feel. So what we're really going to focus on today is the persona development, because as I understand, you have a lot of really rich survey data from kind of understanding and capturing a vision of who your new user groups will be. And personas are really used to kind of put a face to the user group. So personas aren't, one person, but they're a person that is a representative for a particular segment of your users. So they're fictional characters that are based on your real data, and they're like the I suppose I'm trying to think of a stronger word than representative. They're like advocate for that group of users. So not only do they help you to really compile and bring together the kind of whole vision of what these users could be, bringing together their motivations, understanding, their past experiences, what systems maybe they're currently using, the process they're currently using. So you really capture this user group through that, but then also it's something you can keep referring back to throughout the design processes. Because when we go through these kind of long iterative processes, it's very easy to kind of go down a rabbit hole. Maybe you're like, oh, this feature is really interesting, and you're kind of developing it further and further. You have in the back of your mind, okay, I know we're designing for these people, but sometimes you can kind of lose sight of the details. So having these documents and these kind of personas developed, it's really useful for kind of keep revisiting it. Okay, if we're going this direction, how is this going to affect each of these personas that are core user segments? So I find it a really, really useful tool. And you can see in the image here, this is an example of a really simple persona I've done for my project. And we use this actually in the workshop that I showed you the image of earlier in the co-design workshop. And so this isn't really what, if someone said a user persona in UX terms, this probably wouldn't qualify as what a user persona is. It's not what we're going to do in the future or in the exercise today. But I just wanted to include to show,
Katie, I think we are not seeing your PowerPoint.
You're not?
No?
No, I can see
or
it.
just now?
I can
You
see
can
it.
see it.
Yes,
Okay, so
yes.
I have a problem. Sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, I hope you can get it sorted, Mariana.
Yeah, I'm looking to that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, kind of show the flexibility. So as I said, we're going to work more in depth with kind of what we would usually, as UX researchers, would usually think of as a persona in the activity later on. But I'm very much about my methods. I mean, I think when you get more in depth and you kind of gain a lot of understanding with a particular field or particular process, you can kind of break the rules a bit. I really, I think anyone who works in like product management or product owners is like not having like the process take over the product. So I think these tools are, they're flexible. You can use them in the way that works for you to a certain extent. So I just wanted to make the point that I've used these really simple user personas in early stages of design, because in the ICOS project, I know if you're familiar with it, the part we're working on, I won't go into it, but anyway, we already know kind of our key stakeholders are, scientists, policymakers. We already have established who some of them are. So to have these kind of like initial, like, okay, we know we've already identified these people, but we want to understand more about them. So it's almost about like, not reinventing the wheel. We're already guiding the participants in our workshop. Okay, this is what is known. This is what we don't know. And having the option for them to also add additional personas. And then, from here, then we actually do expand it out later on. So I hope I haven't kind of gone on a tangent here, but basically I just want to explain that, you can use these methods and these tools in different ways throughout the process. So usually when we talk about like a fully formed persona, we have different aspects that it comprises of. So typically we want our demographic information, the behavior patterns, and the goals, challenges, and needs of a persona. And we'd also include in these, we really want to create like a person. So we don't want it to be like an anonymous blah. Okay, this is John, he's blah, blah, blah. We really want to give the sense that this is a person. So we're trying to, really part of like empathizing with the user. So we would also maybe include some kind of additional information that we might not think was necessary, like a bit about, what do the users do in their free time? Like how would that maybe contribute to how they interact with systems in work? We'd include maybe user quotes from the data. Okay, this is a challenge that they face, or like understanding scenarios that they go through in work, including these to enhance the relatability. Because we really want to kind of get in touch and really care about this person that we're designing for. And so I have the template we'll use later. And I do encourage you, it has different points you could think about. I don't really understand the specifics of your project. So maybe I think what it will be interesting to discuss in the exercise is, what parts do we want to include, what parts do we not, and maybe what we would add instead. So really think of this template we're going to work with as, what is a template? A guide, not something that we really need to stick to. But basically the idea is that having as much information, relevant information about the user as possible, and really having them as a representative and someone you can empathize with throughout the design process. So I think I've already gone through this bit, the benefits of it, but it really helps us to like align the features with the needs in a kind of really tangible way. And it really, and as I said about, revisiting this persona throughout the design process, it's also a matter of, facilitating collaboration within the team. So we're all working towards the same goal. We all see who we're designing for, and it's very tangible and visual that we don't have to continuously keep reminding each other about, okay, I'm designing for this, I'm designing for that. We have kind of a really clear framework that's used as a boundary object between different members of the team. So we're all on the same page regarding the user expectations. So I think we have a couple more minutes. Yeah, so kind of following this work you'd have done, like this generative research of, surveys, brainstorming, or surveys, interviewing, and developing these user personas. Typically what you would do is, based on this, kind of define help you to define your design requirements. So of course, it's very important at a certain point, as you can see in the design cycle diagram I presented earlier, is this phase of defining. So what do we know now? How can we define the requirements based on the knowledge we already have? So these are really key parts for guiding the development process. So we understand the users, we know what's happening. How can we translate this into something that we can actually produce, something that we can actually design for? And they serve as a reference point of how to, carry out the design, what features we're going to have, but also as a point for later on to evaluate the design success and understand, okay, have we kind of really hit the points that we needed to hit? And here, you're always going to have your kind of must-have features. There's things, okay, these are really important for it to be functional and to actually be something that's going to add enough value for the users that they're going to firstly adopt the product or service and actually use it on an ongoing basis. But then we'd also have our features that are nice to have. Okay, it would be fantastic if we could have this, but it's not essential to the product. And to really understand what these are and try to balance them is really important. So having like really clear design requirements defined throughout the design process, and as with anything, everything's iterative, so it will be iterated on and revised throughout the process. But it's really really useful to have these really clear design requirements mapped out in a document somewhere to continuously refer back to and make sure, okay, are we hitting these, especially of course the must-haves. And the last thing I want to talk about is kind of prototyping and user engagement. So of course, once we have the understanding of what people want, what people need, we understand what their design requirements are, of course, we're going to try to actually build it, okay? How can we actually create a system or a service based on, bringing together these different requirements? And a really key part of that is prototyping. And, prototyping happens, as part of the iterative process throughout the whole life cycle of the design. And with that, we have a variety of different types of prototypes as well, from like low fidelity, like, really early stage sketches, to more high fidelity prototypes that are quite close to what the final system would be. And how we engage users with prototypes at different stages really has an impact. So kind of circling back to what we spoke about earlier. So if you have kind of developed an almost fully fledged service and you want to engage new users around it, bringing this fully fledged service is a bit intimidating, and it kind of blocks users in actually opening up their minds to thinking what it could be when they already see exactly what it is. So while having these really detailed functional prototypes for evaluative research is really, really helpful, it's actually less helpful when we're trying to generate new ideas, new understandings of users, and possible features that could be useful for them. So here you would use kind of really a bit more what we might call like fast and dirty prototypes, or something that looks a little more unfinished, that really gives the participant in your study or your potential user the sense that they can have an influence change here without kind of making you scrap a lot of the work you've done. It looks like these can often take a bit of time, but it looks like something that's been made quite quickly. So for example, you see in the top here, this kind of paper-based prototype where you'd have sketched out what the system might look like. In this case, it's some kind of mobile application. And you can use this to interact with your participant away. Okay, the system is designed to do X, and we have this goal. You would have this feature, and then if you clicked on that, this could happen, and really use that as a boundary object to kind of show, okay, what the system could be. I mean, it's very hard to go in completely blank. I think depending on who we're working with and the project we're working with, it's really understand to get this balance of presenting something that's actually tangible, that users can really envision, okay, this could be a system, this is something that could happen, with also balancing that with the idea, like I said before, if this is something that I can influence and it's still, under construction, that's the real challenge. So really trying to find that balance for your project is interesting. But the main thing here is coming in and actually thinking about how is the type of prototype I'm engaging my user with going to influence and impact the feedback they're going to give me. I can talk a little bit more detail of the bottom is a few frames from a storyboard prototype I used at a workshop quite recently. And this is, I think it's not at the first stage of a design process. It's kind of a bit in where at this point we kind of have an idea of, okay, participants or potential users would like a service that does a certain task. So in this case, we were working with the desire for policymakers to have a service where they can compare different policy ideas. So for example, they have a system, I'm thinking of making public transport free, or I'm also thinking about having low emission zones in my city. And they can input these ideas into a prediction tool, and the tool would then draw on data to understand, okay, this is what could happen if you did A, this is what could happen if you could do B, and give them the knowledge to understand which would be the best route to take. So essentially, we had this knowledge from previous user engagement that this is something that could be really useful, but we were missing kind of the details of that. So to try and really dig deeper into how this could work, how they actually see it playing out in more detail, we use this storyboard prototype. So it kind of introduces the story of this user, Jane. So this is kind of using your personas in a more hands-on, practical way. So we have our persona of Jane, who's a city official in Barcelona, and we're going through the challenges she would face from going through this process. And we have as you can see in some of the frames, we have what we know. So this is processes that we know happen based on our previous research, but then we also have gaps. So for example, we know that, coming up with policies is a challenge, but we don't necessarily know what are the key processes involved in policy development. So we kind of allow users to fill in the gaps and send the story in different directions based on their insights and experiences and their needs. So, I mean, I think it's a really interesting method. If anyone wants more information about it, you're happy to reach out to me, but of course we don't have so much time today. But basically what I'm trying to get across is there's so many different prototyping methods you can use that can be so much more beneficial at the stage of the project or for the goals you're facing right now to identify new users than actually, utilizing this, bringing users the system you already have. The prototype you use really has a big impact on what kind of insights you get from users and how rich they are and how true to what they really need are. So I think we're pretty much right on time. Nice. So I just wanted we'll have a little bit of a Q&A, but I think just to introduce what we're going to do in the activity session after the break. So as I understand, you have some survey data that you've already collected. So the idea is to kind of work with the survey data, try to understand kind of the different segmentations of your potential user groups and kind of work with developing some different groups of users and then creating personas to represent these user groups. And then kind of based on these personas, we're going to try and think of, okay, what kind of interview, if I was conducting a follow-up interview with members of this kind of user group, what kind of questions would I want to ask based on what we already know? And I just want to preface, of course, we don't expect really in-depth analysis of the survey data, This is just to show how the process can work and how we can do it maybe on a bit more of a surface level that then can be iterated in more detail later on. But mostly here focusing on the process of how you would go through these stages. I know we weren't sure when we were doing the organization for this, how many people would attend, but I think the general idea was to make some groups that I guess we will do in the breakout rooms. So I guess I can discuss that with Eleonora. But yeah, idea we would have we guys will work together in groups to try and look at the data you have, develop a persona and think about the questions that might be asked. And as I mentioned earlier, I will provide this kind of rough template of what you might look for, what you might think about when you're creating your persona. But yeah, the rules are made to be broken. also please consider things you think would be irrelevant and add things you think could actually be relevant than what's existing here. But yeah, that's it for me. I think I'm happy to take any questions. I hope it's been insightful. It's, I mean, there's a lot to dig into, so I guess it can be quite surface level with this time, but I hope it has been of some use to you anyway. So thanks so much.